I remember the Alamo Market used to have these coloring contests all the time for kids. So you could come in and pick up these little sheets, you color it, and then they put it up in the store and you could win a little prize, which was probably like candy or something like that.
Welcome to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast, conversations with women who have found their home in the Mojave Desert. I'm Dawn Davis, and this is episode 149. Find out more about the podcast at desertladydiaries.com and engage with the guests, other listeners, or me on Facebook and Instagram at Desert Lady Diaries. And if you do your audio listening on Pandora, you'll now find the Desert Lady Diaries podcast there as well. ShaWanda Gatson is an educator, writer, storyteller, and yogi. She was born in Mississippi but raised in 29 Palms and has lived in the Morongo Basin for over 20 years. She's also the managing editor for the online-based publication Untamed Voices under the umbrella of Untamed Yoga Studio, both located in Joshua Tree. ShaWanda lives in Yucca Valley with her son Mateo and their miniature schnauzer, Duchess. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. What was your first experience with desert?
Well, my first experience definitely started out here in 1985, 86, somewhere in there. My dad, we moved out here because my dad was in the military. So my first experience with the desert was 29 Palms. And that became the place for my childhood. So I was there from third grade until high school. So I did all of those. I made my first friends here, had my first loves. All that stuff was here, all those firsts. My sister was born here in 29 Palms. So there's a lot of memories of family. And so that's kind of what the desert, it was kind of my foundation. So
Right. So I was going to ask you how old you were when you came. So third grade. Do you remember like leaving school? Was it Mississippi where you were coming from?
We were actually in North Carolina. So with the Marine Corps, my dad we went from Bridgeport, California, or from Mississippi to Bridgeport, California, to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and then 29 Palms.
Okay.
So that's what kind of bounced us around a little bit.
Do you remember any, going to school in North Carolina and how that felt to be like leaving your friends, or was it something that you were already accustomed to because you had been from Mississippi to California to North Carolina?
I honestly don't have a whole lot of memories from being in North Carolina. I have bits and pieces. So I don't think I ever felt like that was home, maybe. So there are definitely good memories that I have, certain like Long John Silver, that was there. And that was something me and my dad would go get and stuff like that. So there's those little nuggets of things I remember. But as far as where I felt like my life kind of started and my memories kind of started was when we got here to the desert.
Right. And when you came, did you all live on base or did you live off base?
Initially, we lived off base. So we lived back, it used to be the Alamo Market. I'm dating myself. But the
People that listen to this love to hear what used to be. So do you remember where that was? And
yeah. So the Alamo Market is right there on Adobe, and it's right before you turn, I forget the street name, but right before you turn at the light to go to the bowling alley and to the post office. And there was an apartment complex that was right there. And that's where we lived. And I remember there was a laundromat right there next to the Alamo Market, which was kind of one of the main grocery stores at the time. And we would use that laundromat sometime. We would shop at the Alamo. I remember the Alamo Market used to have these coloring contests all the time for kids. So you could come in and pick up these little sheets, you color it, and then they put it up in the store and you could win a little prize, which was probably like candy or something like that. But I do remember that. So yeah.
Yeah. So what was it like growing up here in the desert in 29 Palms?
It was interesting. It was for us, for my upbringing, we were really involved in the church. Mm-hmm. So during my upbringing, it was school and church. That's pretty much what I did. And that's where we got our community from, was within church and then at school and stuff like that. So I went through a lot of changes and a lot of seasons here and growing up. And I mean, I met one of my best friends here. We're still friends to this day. And at times it was boring though. I mean, especially once I got up into high school and stuff like that. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot to do. There was Foster Freeze. There was no Burger King at the time. And there's Del Taco and Pizza Hut, and so we would just go to those different places and hang out at each other's houses and stuff. But as a teenager, when you want to see more and you see things on TV and you read and everything like that, you want more. And I don't know if that's just part of being 18-year-old, ready to go out and have your own experiences. So we stayed busy and I had family and friends and everything here. But as I got ready to leave, I was like, okay, I'm ready for something else. I want to see other things. I want to have more options, just more options. So but overall, I would say it was a good upbringing, though.
Right.
I have a lot of fond memories. So,
Nice. Talk to me about the downtown area. I would say, like now where Campbell Hill Bakery and all that stuff is. Was that hustling and bustling when you were here, or was Yucca Valley kind of bringing everybody there to do any kind of shopping and
mhm,
things like that for like school clothes or things? Some other folks have been on the podcast who have grown up there and said they would travel even past Yucca Valley and
mhm.
out to do that kind of shopping. What was your experience with that?
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. We had, like Thrifties, and we had Benton Brothers, which was another locally owned store. And they did have some things that you could get, like, school supplies and stuff like that. It wasn't as vast as what you would get at like a Walmart or Target or something like that. But it was a good, if you needed it and you didn't want to make the drive, you could find it. And then I had the extra advantage of being military. So we had the resources on base as well. So the PX, as they call it, which is where you could go to buy shoes and electronics and clothes and things like that. So I do remember the first pair of shoes that I saved up for, I bought there. My first, little Sony Walkman, the one with the tape, and then later the one with the CD at the PX. But so I think we kind of tried to stay here, but I do have memories of when we needed to do kind of like some like the big school shopping to get clothes and stuff like that. We would go to Yucca because we had Kmart. And then sometimes we would go down below. And then that would be like a whole day experience where we'd eat and just kind of hit all the places we needed to in one fell swoop. So,
Wow, fun, different
yeah.
than it is today, right?
Oh, yeah, very different. I mean, that little area down there, I mean, I've seen so many different stores and stuff come and go. I mean, I remember where there was like a Curves Fitness. You remember that
Yeah.
ladies fitness? There was one of those down there. Tons of little eateries. The donut place has always been there and stuff like that. So it's definitely changed quite a bit. And when I first came back to the desert this time around, I went out to 29 and it did feel different. It feels different than what it did when I was in school and when I was younger. I
In
think,
what ways? Can you put some words to it?
yeah, I think it was like when we were there, the military base was there, and typically, military families, they would come all together and go out to the base, live on the base, live in town, become a part of the community. And that was just the way things were done. But the way the world has changed now, where families, like if a military member is going to be deployed for a year and a half or 2 years, they have more options now to where the family and the wife and the kids can live near her parents or his parents or somewhere else where they're going to get that support they need while he's gone. And so I think because of that shift in being able to kind of be more transient between more than one place, it doesn't have that same like energy that it did that I remember
Mm,
when I was growing up. And it could be just because I don't live there and I live in Yucca now, or it could be just a sign of the times that it just feels different. So,
gotcha.
yeah.
So you were talking about being a kind of a restless 18-year-old looking
Mhm.
for more.
Mhm.
So what happened for you after graduation?
So I was very driven in school, very driven in high school. And so I knew I wanted to go to college. And that was something my parents, that was just not an option of not to do, but they supported me in that and everything like that. So I graduated and I went to Pepperdine University in Malibu and had a tremendous 4 years. That was its own just amazing experience. And then after I graduated, I moved back here to 29 and I started my family. I got married and had my son and had my first real job at Copper Mountain College. And then there were some shifts in my family and some stuff happened and then we moved again. We went to Sacramento for about a year just to do something different. And then my mom got sick, so we moved out to Mississippi, which during this time they had ended up leaving 29 and moving back out to the South where we're from. So, and then, yeah, I mean, I left again and then I came back, and now this time around I'm back and I've gone through more changes and more transitions. My son turned 18. He graduated from high school. I got a divorce, but that's been what it needed to be. So yeah, I've just learned a lot. The desert has ended up being a great place of growth for me, and a place to, it feels, um, it feels safe, I guess you could say. It feels like a place where I can come, where I'm going to get quiet and I'm going to get peace, and I can just hear myself and I can just figure out what to do next. So,
Right. That's what I was going to ask you, because you said you left and come back and left and come back. And I was wondering, what were those things that drew you back here? And it sounds like, it was all really for growth and just being in the space, listening to your heart.
yeah, definitely. And I've seen myself like I start in one place every time I've been here, and I end at a completely different place before I leave. So, of course, from 1986 to 1996, which was my childhood and everything, I grew up as a person. I grew up, my sister came along, and my sibling, and everything. So all of that came together, and then I needed to go and find the next part of me. So I went out and experienced and everything. And then I came back here, and then I started my family and rediscovered myself and learned how to be an adult. When I got back after graduated from college, I was 23, and normal idealistic 23-year-old, I'm going to change the world and this is the way it is and all my opinions are right because I just went to college.
I'm
And
smart.
yes, and you do learn a lot, but then after that college experience, then you get dropped into that real world where you have to see, what it is to be an adult. It's different than being on campus, where everything is. You have your roommates, you have your assignments, and you go out party and whatever you do, and hang out. But then you have to come here and find out that real adult stuff, like getting a job, how to work with difficult people, how to, when you get sick, what do you do now that you're the adult? And if it's big, how do you raise a child? How do you, all these things? And I learned all of that here. I learned that first. And then I took that knowledge and then left and learned some more stuff about myself out there, and then brought that back here. And on top of that, got something. So it was that too. It wasn't just that every time I came, I was given something. I found that every time I came, I also gave into something. And I think that's been kind of a symbiotic relationship that me and the desert have had. There's a trust there, I guess, between us that, like, if I come back, I will come back bearing something, giving you something, bringing what I've learned from not being here to here, into the people that I interact with and the jobs I've held. But then also it allowed me to kind of level up and see that next part of myself that I needed to grow in. So.
Nice. So at what point was it that you got involved with yoga?
So yoga started, it's been about 2 years, a little bit over 2 years, actually. I had just gotten a divorce, and it was something that it just needed to happen. It was amicable. We figured everything out, but I found that I needed something. And I wanted to, I wouldn't say I completely lost myself in my marriage, but there were certain roles that you play when you are married, and you are a mom, and you are a working mother, and you are a sister and a daughter, and all these things like that. The roles, you take those on. And so that was fine, but it was coming to an end, that role wasn't going to be a part of my life anymore, being wife. And so I had always wanted to try yoga. And in 2019, I decided I was going to do 19 things that I've never done. I was going to read 19 books, and I was going to watch 19 movies that I've never watched. And one of the main things I wanted to do was to try yoga. So January 2019, I walked into one of the yoga studios and found new members of my soul tribe. And it's been an amazing journey. I've never liked exercise. I don't like it. I
Me
wasn't I wasn't a huge athlete in high school. I did track, but that was pretty much because it was co-ed, so we got to hang out with the boys. I was a little bit boy crazy when I was younger. Um, but and I tried tennis, but that was but so exercise just wasn't for me. And I didn't get what yoga was. I'd heard about it. One of my students' mother was yoga instructor, and I'd look at it online. I'm like, what are they doing? Like, it's just these poses. What? And it just wasn't for me. But then when it was time for it to be for me, it looked completely different.
Mm.
And when I walked into the space, I knew like, yeah, this is gonna be something in my life. And so that kind of went from there. And then COVID happened. There were some changes in the different studios and offerings around the Morongo Basin. And one of my teachers that I really connected with, she had a yin yoga class I used to go to, and she just would have these phenomenal playlists. And with yin yoga, we did a candlelight yin. And so with candlelight yin, it was just candlelights, your mat, the music, and yourself. And I can't tell you how many times I just wept on that mat. And I wasn't the only one. There was just so much purging that came through that. And that kind of introduced me into yoga, was the yin part. And then after that, I started into doing more flows and hatha, and then starting to push my body. And that's the thing I love about yoga. It tells you to push yourself to your edge, and everybody's edge is different. And you're not in competition with anybody but yourself. Like, when you're giving 100% to the practice, or 100% to your relationships or to your job or whatever, but you also know when you're not. And it's okay if you're not, but that's when you got to look at that space and say, why am I not showing up? And that's what yoga has helped me to do. It's helped me to learn to breathe, to connect with my body, to know that there's a person inside of me that is just me, that needs to be nourished. I went had some codependency things I've dealt through, and just finding that I guess I've really gotten to the point of, I understand what it means to have self-love. It can start with taking bubble baths and journaling and hiking. That's definitely an introduction into it. But it gets to the point where you decide and you see why you have to take care of yourself first, or you cannot show up for the other people in your life, or the other things in your life. And if you love them and you want those things in your life, the best way to show up for them fully is to take care of yourself. And that's what I did with yoga. I would go in and we would have these 75-minute, 90-minute classes. I would text my son before I went in. I'd say, hey, I'm going to yoga. My phone's in the car, leave it in the car. And I walked in there and I just let me be me. Felt if I was angry, if I was sad, if I was frustrated, whatever needed to feel, I was able to do it in that space, and then take that release and that kind of, it was almost like you get a little brevity from your life, because there's times in your life where it's just so busy and so complicated, and it just is what it is, and you're not at a place where you can get certain things out of your life, and it's just busy and it's chaotic, and you just got to learn how to deal with it for right now. That's the season you're in. And yoga gave me that place that I could go to, where no one expected anything of me. I was just me, and on my little mat in the back of the room.
in my world.
Yes. And from there, it's just grown from there. So, into yoga and meditation, and then now into Untamed Voices. So it's been every step of the way, every person that I've met, it has been what it needed to be. So.
Well, and great segue, because it seems like writing is also a place where you find solace and where you can be yourself. And that most recent online issue of Untamed Voices, there was an article about boundaries and that self-love that you need to have, and taking care of yourself, by Melissa Grissy, who has also been on this podcast.
Yeah, I love
And then you told your own story about your dad, your biological dad. And that came through for me as you were just talking now about the yoga and those places where we find ourselves being all things to all people. And eventually we just have to stop that and say, no, I am my own person and I deserve to be taken care of and I need to be taken care of. But the bottom line is the buck stops with us
Mhm.
to own that, like you
Yes.
were saying. Talk to me about Untamed Voices and how that all got started. What inspired you to start that? Basically, a magazine online, I would
Yeah.
guess, right?
Yeah, an
Yeah.
online publication. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I have a background in writing as well. So, teaching and writing has kind of been working in education, and writing has always been a part of my life. In education, I started working in financial aid, worked through that for a little while, and then got my teaching credential and started teaching. As far as writing goes, I wrote, in high school just for fun. I did a little bit of writing, a few little letters to the editor when I was in college. And I do also have my MFA in creative writing, which I graduated 2 years ago with that, which that was its own little journey. But I've always incorporated writing into my life. I initially got my teaching certificate in English. So it has been a huge part of my life because I consider myself to be an introvert with extrovert tendencies. So I do love being around people. I do love getting out there, having fun and everything. And that comes out in my personality and everything like that. But it also drains a lot of me. So I do have some, I don't know if I'm actually an empath. I mean, I bet I've heard it, but I definitely do feel a lot of, I take on the energies around me. And so it becomes very draining. Small talk is very hard for me, things like that. So the writing allows me to say what it is I need to say without a filter, and to kind of share bits of part of myself that people may not know, because there's certain people that know the inner workings of my heart and my life and everything like that. But a lot of people don't. I wouldn't say that I'm secretive, but I feel that there are some things that are just private and some things that are not. Yeah, so writing really allows me to do that. And Untamed Voices came into my life. Emily Silver, who is the owner of Untamed Yoga, she was the teacher who was teaching the yin class that I was speaking about earlier. And so her and I just had a rapport. We just kind of resonated with each other. And she found out about my writing. And then as we were in 2020, and we were seeing everything going on with the political world and with George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter and things like that. She's an incredible advocate for social justice and things like that. And so she had this desire to create something that would amplify the voices of marginalized in the communities. She saw, as a white woman, that there were certain privileges and things that she had that came with that, but she wanted to be an ally, and she wanted it not to be, hey, this is my agenda, but what is it that I have, that I possess, what can I do? And she knew I was a writer, and so she asked me if I would be interested, and it took us a couple months to kind of figure out where we saw it going and what the flow is going to be. And of course 2020 was crazy for everybody, so she was dealing with 2020, I was dealing. And then finally we were able to get to a place. We brought it together. First piece was about the sound baths that we were doing, social distancing back in the spring when the weather was nice. So that it kind of started there. And then from there, we have our meetings and we figure out. But she's just been tremendously open to allowing me to kind of go in certain directions. And we talk about different things and come up with these ideas that just work really well. And she's helped me to see beyond what my upbringing was and my perspective on life, and see it from another person's perspective. I grew up in church, I grew up in religion. So all that has just been a part of who I was. Other people don't always do that. So to be able to see how what I think is okay or appropriate or whatever may not be appropriate for everybody else. I remember with our Christmas issue, we had holiday issue, our winter issue. See, I still say it. I still say
Right.
Christmas and holiday because I'm thinking from my perspective
Mhm.
of what I called it. But not everybody celebrates that the same way. And so when we came up with that, the concept for that issue, it became about winter. What is it during this season of winter? How do you celebrate? How do you show up in the world? And we brought in the different voices of how different people view that time. So it's been an amazing experience. And yeah, it's just going to keep growing and growing. And
So, for someone who's listening and isn't yet familiar with Untamed Voices, where can they find that to start with?
We can find it online at untamedyogastudio.com. And we have a link there right to it. And then also we are on social media. So if you look for Untamed Yoga on social media, we post about Untamed Voices as well. And then I have my own website, which is ShaWandaGatson.com. And you can go there also to see links to articles I've written in particular, and then the full articles for Untamed Voices as well. So there's a lot of different ways that you can find us.
And I noticed that you also have information if there are folks who are interested in contributing. There are
Yeah.
just those parameters are out there and how to submit.
Yes, absolutely. We're always looking for, and when we say we want to amplify voices, you do not have to just be a part of the Black community or be a female or the LGBT community. It could be anything, anything. But if you have a voice and you have something that you want to say, whether it be written or art, architecture, dance, or whatever it is, we do want to hear from you. And we want to hear about the stories of how things have changed for you since 2020. What's been your pivot? What have you learned through this? So we have some great themes coming up. Our next theme issue is going to be curiosity. So we're actually in the middle of putting that one out by the end of the month. And then after that, it's going to be play and gratitude, because we want to kind of focus on, we've been through a lot. 2020 was a dumpster fire. And then we thought it was we're like, okay, maybe it's going to be okay. And then the coup happened. And then we were all just waiting in suspense to see if the inauguration was going to happen. And then I think once we had that, all sides, no matter what side you were on politically, I think we were ready to say, okay, let's start moving forward. And what is that going to look like? And so we've been doing that. We've been doing a lot of heavy work. March is a year from when we went into lockdown. So to celebrate play and gratitude in that, we're really excited to do that, because I know for some people there was amazing things that happened for them in 2020. It was a time of change and weddings and babies and things like that. So there were so many things that were still to be grateful for during that time. And we want to kind of focus on that and seeing what things people were getting into, that was fun and brought them joy and in 2020, and so yeah, it's going to be a fun issue. So yeah, if people have anything they want to say about that, they can go to my website, go to Untamed Yoga online, and we'd love to hear from you. So
how often do the issues come out? Is it a monthly or is it a quarter?
It is monthly. Yeah,
monthly.
It's a monthly issue. When we first started, we were coming out towards the end of the month, and we're kind of working our production schedule so we can get to where they're going to be coming out the first of the month. And then as things change with COVID and the vaccine, and we begin to open up more to be able to be around each other and things like that, we hope to take Untamed Voices into some new arenas and do some new things coming up. So yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. So.
That's great. Thanks so much for telling us all about that. Appreciate it. And you're also now involved with the Institute of Inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
Kimberly Sikora, who's been on this podcast way in the beginning when I first started and was bringing in like my friends because I wasn't sure how this podcast thing was going to go. I'm like, would you come on and talk with me? She was one of those people who has since started, it's a enrichment program to complement either homeschooling or children that are in regular school once we get back to regular school. But can you talk a little bit about that high level and then what you're going to be doing with Institute of Inquiry?
So yeah, the Institute, it is an organization that we do offer different interdisciplinary classes. It has been primarily for kids that are in homeschool or charter school. And it can be also for kids that are in the regular K through 12 system, but it's just those kind of extra project-based learning that we do. And so I actually started talking to Kimberly last year. We had been playing phone tag or email tag for a while. We connected because of Emily. And so she was looking for someone. We finally had a chance to interview, and we had an amazing interview that just kind of turned into a conversation. And she asked me to come on, and it was something that I was looking for. I had left my full-time teaching position for several different reasons, but so I've been at home, working at home, doing things at home. And so I was looking to get back into teaching, but in a way that made sense to me, in a way that I felt like I could show up. Because prior to coming on, I had went through a significant burnout. I've dealt with depression most of my life, things like that. And then just the weight of life and things ending, son turning 18, divorce, all just kind of came to a head. Part of that was leaving my old job. And I wanted to start focusing on my writing and yoga and mindfulness and things like that. So when this opportunity came available, I was able to do it online. First class I taught for her, I stepped in for a teacher, and I stepped in and taught that class for 3 weeks online. It was twice a week. Yeah. And met some great kids. It was fun. It reminded me of why I love being a teacher. Taught them yoga and mindfulness practices, breathing, meditation, and things like that. Had some fun. And it was a great experience. So she asked if I'd come back and do it again for this next session that starts on March 22nd. So I'm doing a 5 senses yoga. So it's going to be a yoga class based on 5 senses, but it's going to include breath work, meditation, some social emotional learning, all kind of combined together for grades K through 2nd grade. Also offering a reading club, like a mindfulness reading club. And we're going to pick a couple books to read. I'm going to talk about resilience and grit and look at that kind of, and that's for both. We have one available for 3rd grade through 4th grade, and then one for the 6th through 8th grade. And so, so if people are interested in that, they can definitely head over to the Institute of Inquiry's website. You can also find them online or on social media at both Instagram and Facebook if people are interested. And so I'm excited. It's going to be fun to connect with kids again and just be silly.
Yeah. Part of that gratitude and play thing too.
For sure.
Yeah.
Being around kids is the quickest way to pull out my sense of fun and things like that. I had a chance to visit a couple days ago with my ex-husband's family. And so I got to see 2 of my nieces. Okay. And one's 5 and the other one is 3. And they haven't seen me in forever. So I was like, I don't know if they're going to remember me, but it was just fun. Like I ended up playing like Mario Kart with the 3-year-old. And then we played hide and seek. And then I said, hey, you want to jump on the bed? Let's jump on the bed, and it was just so it was so beautiful. And the oldest at the end, she told me, she's like, I am going to miss you so much. And I was like, oh my goodness. That just reminded me, that is why I love being a teacher. That's why I love being around kids. And it's just, they're just fun. And I know parents are busy and they've got things they got to do, and you got to go here, you got to do this, you got to do this. So a lot of times you're just like, okay, kid, go do this, go do your homework, go do this, let's go to bed and everything. So just to be able to have an adult that is part of your child's life to say, hey, let's just be silly. Like when I was in the classroom, we just have random Disney karaoke or whatever the situation called for, to just be like, and sometimes it'd be me, we'd be listening to like an instrumental version of Disney music. The kids are all quiet and they're all working. And then like a Little Mermaid song will come on because that's my favorite Disney character or Disney princess. And all of a sudden I can't help it. And I'm like, la, la, la. And then they start singing. And so then I'm like, okay, that was my fault. We had fun. Go back to work.
Just a little break.
You got 15 minutes until recess. So. And then the negotiations would come out. Well, since you took away part of that 5 minutes with the singing, how about we only have to write 4 sentences in our paragraph instead of 6? And I'd be like, that is true. And that is a reasonable, okay, we can do that.
So they're learning negotiation skills as
well. They are. And fairness, that is fair. That makes sense,
Totally.
Yeah. But so, it's been great. I'm looking forward to the classes with the Institute that start next week. Fun. And I'm just going to do some fun things and then kind of see where I go from there.
That's great. Well, it's great to have you here in the desert doing all these wonderful things. And I thank you for your time today. I know you're a busy lady with all the stuff that's going on. So before you go, what I'd like to do is pick out some questions out of the magic jar. This is part of the Diary Unlocked portion of the podcast that is exclusive content to Patreon supporters of the Desert Lady Diaries podcast. So if you're listening and you want to hear ShaWanda's answers to the questions that I'm going to ask, Just go out to desertladydiaries.com, click on the support page, and sign up to be a patron of the podcast. The questions I'm going to ask ShaWanda are, how do you cope with stress?
Okay.
We might have a clue after this conversation. 2 pieces of advice for someone that's moving to the desert. Tell me about a loss you've experienced and how did you move through it and what was the result? And 1 year from now, what will you be celebrating? So again, if you're listening and you would like to hear ShaWanda's answers to those questions, go out to desertladydiaries.com, click on the support page, and sign up to become a patron of the podcast. Thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Got some shout outs to new desert resident Sonal, who came into Soul Connection with her friend Patrice. Sonal, welcome to the desert. And to sisters Kathleen and Tracy, who traveled up from Desert Hot Springs and stopped into Soul Connection. It was great to meet you both. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. And Helen H., thanks for the follow on SoundCloud. And a few more shout-outs to Elaine S. and Gary T. for signing up for the new episode newsletter. Thank you both for checking out the podcast. Be like Gary and Elaine. Go to desertladydiaries.com, click on the newsletter button, and sign up to receive the new episode newsletter. Every new episode will be delivered directly to your email box every other week. Or just subscribe from the platform you're listening from. It's always free to subscribe. And I hope you got to check out my interview with Visit California. They did a profile on 3 California podcasts you should know, and Desert Lady Diaries was one of them. Go to visitcalifornia.com/podcasts and find it under 3 California podcasts you should know. There's a picture of Walt Disney and Mickey Mouse. That'll make it easy to find. Thanks so much for listening.